This is lesson 1 of 3 to help you understand National 5 textual analysis with the lead poem War Photographer. This set of lessons is to understand how to answer the commonality section of the 8-mark question. It's only worth 2 marks. The success criteria for this set of work is learning how to and being able to break the question down, be able to think deeper about the key ideas in each poem, which you'll see in the think out louds, and at the end you can follow the strategy to describe commonality and apply it to different questions. So what is the purpose of the final question? Really, to compare and contrast key ideas in 2 poems or more than 2 poems. Normally we use just the given poem and 1 contrasting poem, but you can use more than 1. So the given poem that we're using in this set of work is War Photographer. That is our main focus. And the other 2 poems that you can use as comparisons are Originally and in Mrs. Tilsher's Class, but when you have been taught the rest, you can use those 2. This is the textual analysis final question that we modelled throughout this set of lessons. By referring to this poem and at least one other by Duffy, discuss how she explores emotionally disturbing situations. Now that is the common theme between the 2 poems, emotionally disturbing situations. So when thinking about this commonality for 2 marks, I want you to think about these questions. How does War Photographer explore emotionally disturbing situations? And then how does Originally explore emotionally disturbing situations? It's whatever poem that you think best fits that question would go in the second section. Now, breaking down the strategy for commonality only, this is what I want you to use. So first of all, you have to put a bullet point and then you name the first poem, the given poem that you see in front of you. Then you will describe what the poem is about in generalised terms. And then thirdly, how would you relate that poem to the question on a deeper level? And then you will do that twice by naming the second poem and doing the same thing. Now, as an example, you see 2 bullet points on this slide and you see both poems are named and then you see both linked to the question, emotionally disturbing situation. But neither of these would get any marks because although they do those things, they don't show the understanding of the key ideas that goes to that deeper level. And that is something that you need to do. What does the poem really explore? You can't just repeat the words of the question. Now this is a think out loud slide which shows the thinking behind this question. How does War Photographer explore emotionally disturbing situations? So if I was thinking about that question, a lot of things would come up about what he experiences, including the mood that he feels at the start, the dark and depressing mood, the explosions, the nightmare heat that he experienced within the poem, the agonies that he has witnessed, coping with the emotional experience and all those powerful emotions coming back as he does his work, the limited public reaction to the tragedy, the fact that he is haunted by memories of people dying, his desire for peace and isolation within the dark room. At the end of the poem, where he selects few photos from the hundreds that he took, believing his job is sacred and important, which it is, and he believes it to be, and then at the very end of the poem shutting his emotions down to do it all over again and flying to the next place to do his job. So taking into consideration the think out loud and all of the things that haunt the photographer in these emotionally distressing times that he has had both in his job and at home, this is how I want you to set out an example of what we're looking for. So as you can see, War Photographer is named and then it says as a poem that explores, which is kind of your catchphrase to get into the commonality, but the job of a man who takes photos of trauma, war and death across the world. So the name of the poem and what the poem is about are already highlighted in more detail than simply saying he is a war photographer. The next part gives us the link to the question on a deeper level. What is the poem poet trying to explore? And linked to the question, the poet explores the emotionally disturbing situation he faces on a daily basis. To take photos and walk away instead of helping or saving people, the emotional weight of seeing so much suffering is difficult to bear. So this would achieve 1 mark because it clearly understands what the poem and the poet was trying to do in relation to the question. So here is the second think out loud, and I've decided to compare in this question originally as my second poem, and I have to think about how that explores emotionally disturbing situations. So in my think out loud, thinking about the poem itself, this poet had to leave her childhood home. As part of that, she had to adapt and try and fit in, very emotionally disturbing. And within the poem, the change and the shock of growing up as she learns a different place. So the strong reactions of her brothers were emotionally disturbing. The feeling of homesickness. She's always confused and anxious about her emotional experience of moving. She feels isolated. She feels the loss of her childhood home. She is unsure of who she is. Her identity is a strong theme in the poem. And again, losing the culture and language of Scotland. It also includes her parents, who are very unsure of their decision to move the family. Emotionally disturbing situations is explored throughout this poem, so it makes the ideal comparator. Okay, so this slide sets out the answer to the question. So as you can see, originally is the start, the name of the poem, and then it says, as a poem that explores, which again gives you that way in, the poet's personal and difficult experience as a child, moving from Scotland to England. In this respect, it gives you a little bit more detail about what the poem is about, not just saying it's a poem about moving house or moving country. It's about that personal and difficult experience. Then it moves on to the link to the question, where Duffy explores the emotionally disturbing situation. There's the link to the question of losing her cultural identity and language, having to adapt, learn and change as a young child. The young girl is confused and uncertain about who she is, how to act and speak in a new place. Now, you could get away with not having that last sentence. You could take that last sentence out. It just re-clarifies it, but it is about giving that level of depth that you know what the poem is really trying to explore on the deeper level. So this is just really putting it together, the last few slides, of what it should look like on your page with the bullet points and the subheading. Okay, so at this point you should be thinking about what you've learned, and there are ways to think about, where you're at with your learning. Although you've been doing this in class and you've done it before, you can still think whether you're red, amber or green. And if you are in the amber or red zone, you can type a question to your teacher. You can go back and look at what you've already looked at before. You can phone a friend and work together. And then together, when you feel confident, you can move on to the next section. Okay, so using the skills that you've already learned about commonality, you're going to not move forward with the whole question as the 8 marker, but you're going to apply your skills to a different question for the commonality section only. So this is the second question that you're going to work with as part of your learning. And it says, by referring to this poem and at least one other by Duffy, discuss how she explores the link between past and present. Now with this, it's still War Photographer, that is your main poem, the given poem. That's the one you'd have in front of you in an assessment situation. But I want you to think about how it explores the link between the past and the present with that particular poem. Now, if you were going to compare them, you have got more than one choice. You have got how does originally explore the link between past and present and go down that road, or how does in Mrs. Tilsher's class explore the link between past and present, and then you'll go with that one. You're not going to do all three. You would really just do War Photographer plus one other, depending on how strong you know that poem. Now, to help you with the thinking of this question, this different question, behind the commonalities and your knowledge of the poem, how does War Photographer link between past and present? So I've broken this down in my mind to talk about what's in the past and what's in the present. So in the past of the War Photographer's life, he has the reality of taking pictures in war zones. That's where he goes, but he is not in that reality right now. That's what he has done previously in the poem. He has experienced the exploding fields and the deaths that he's seen, the heat and the nightmares and all the agonies that he has witnessed in the past. So he is then reflecting in the present, coping with the powerful emotions that are coming back to him from his memories. His mood in the present is dark. He has shaky hands that come back with the emotions. He is not happy. He's very unhappy with the public reaction to the tragedy. He is haunted by the memories of seeing people die and not being able to help. And he has this really powerful desire for peace and isolation within his darkroom. And right now, his editor is selecting the photos from hundreds, and that again creates that emotional experience in the present for the photographer. So if you're comparing originally with this question and you're thinking about the past and the present with originally, and this is what you choose to do, thinking about the past and originally, you have the old familiar rooms in the streets of Scotland that are gone in the past as she moves forward, travelling in the red room. You have the extreme emotions of her brothers, her parents, herself, the reactions in the car, her Scottish accent that seems to be in the past, and the parents questioning the decision to go, whether that is, the right thing. So in the present, as she feels different, as she's moved country, the loss of the culture and the sense of belonging in the present, how she feels, moving from a child to a teen, this idea of growing up and realising things are not easy when you move, the growing uncertainty, the feelings of anxiety, that's still in her present, the conflict with the big boys, and this idea of trying to fit in, hesitation, changing accent, and acceptance of where she is now. Now, in case you choose to do a Mrs. Tilsher's class as the Lincoln poem, the link between past and present in Mrs. Tilsher's class, if you were thinking about the past, you would be thinking the childhood experience of the cheerful, bright learning environment of Mrs. Tilsher's classroom. You would recognise that she uses the senses to bring back the warm memories of that classroom. The teacher herself was warm and loving, and it was a time of innocence, where she really, really loved learning, and how she was spellbound by reading and everything that she learned. In the present, as she moves forward, even as it's a reflection, she is thinking about change and reflecting on that change. She is thinking about how experience is a rite of passage and how that inevitably comes to us all as the passage to adulthood, how turbulent it is to grow up and how that brings its own challenges. Conflicting with a boy when you found out how you were born, and the stormy emotions at the end of the poem of moody teenagers. This is all like more of a move from past to present and could provide the link in the poems. Now at this point you could go back in the slides and get the strategy again, where it set out the bullet point and set out exactly how to write it out, and then your job is to take the think out louds and write a commonality section for the question about past and present. Here is the reminder of the strategy. Now this is an example of a graphic organiser that you can use to help you get your mind into the question, what it should look like, and you can print this off or use it and copy it. Now at this point in the lesson, you should have gone through all of the learning to be able to write your own commonality question on the past and the present and compared War Photographer with one of the other poems that you know. What we want at this point is you to keep that commonality, because you will add to that. But what I really want you to do is think about how confident you are about your learning, about how you've been able to apply that learning, and what you're handing into teams to your teacher is really this exit pass. Thinking about the success criteria and what you're really learning only for 2 marks, whether you're red, amber or green, and then hand in your exit pass and how you feel to your teacher so they can kind of monitor, see how you're getting on, and then move on to the next section so you can then add another 2 marks to the end of this 8-mark question.